I'd like to welcome everyone to the Thursday, November 4th, 2021 Walnut Creek Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Secretary, can you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Lezak?
Here.
Commissioner Pickett?
Here.
Commissioner Strongman?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Vice Chair Reiser?
Here.
Chair Kraselic?
Here.
Commissioner Ward apparently is absent tonight, but we do have a quorum with 6.
Great, thank you. The first item is the consent calendar. There's one item on the consent calendar this evening. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners or a motion?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Mr. Secretary, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Lezak?
Yes.
Commissioner Pickett?
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Reiser?
Yes.
And Chair Kraselic?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. This is the time for public communications. Anyone wishing to speak on any items that are not on tonight's agenda are welcome to approach the podium or call in on the Zoom. Commissioner, is there anyone who wishes to address us at this time in the audience? Seeing none, is there anybody online, Mr. Secretary?
Actually, I was going to do the Zoom spiel, but there are no attendees, no public attendees on Zoom, so no.
Okay, thank you. We'll then move on to item number 4, which is public hearings. We have one public hearing this evening. That is the Trinity Center Evening Winter Shelter Program Conditional Use Permit Application Y21097. And we will start off with a city staff report.
Chair Kraselic, if I may just note, you'll of course notice that Senator Gill, the case planner on this, is virtually here, not in reality here. And the reason for that is she was starting to feel a little under the weather, and given the still happening COVID pandemic, decided to opt on the side of caution and stay at home just in case.
Great, thank you. Well, it's good to see her, even if it's virtually.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Simmer Gill, Associate Planner with the City, and we are here tonight to consider Trinity Center's Evening Winter Shelter Program that will operate at the Armory at 1800 Carmel Drive. The application number is Y21097, and the applicant representing Trinity Center, Leslie Gleason, I believe, is here tonight in person. And Pam McGrath and Marjolyn Das are present, also representing Trinity Center, are present via Zoom, as am I, to answer any questions that you may have after. Trinity Center is a nonprofit organization located in Walnut Creek that provides services to the homeless population. And Trinity Center is proposing to operate a temporary evening shelter for its existing members from December 1st, 2021 to April 15th, 2022. And if approved tonight, this will be the 6th consecutive year that the temporary shelter will operate within the Armory. And this year, City Council approved funding in the amount of $100,000 to cover a portion of the program's budget. And last year, the city entered into a 3-year management agreement with Trinity Center. The 3-year management agreement is valid through July of 2023. And the city also entered into an annual agreement with the state military department to allow the use to occur at the Armory, which is a state facility. And here is an aerial view of the site where the overnight services will take place. It is essentially a large building that's surrounded by a parking lot. And as you can see, Civic Park is located to the left of the property, and the Iron Horse Trail can be seen on the right side. And I've provided an aerial map that basically shows the zoning surrounding this site. And here is a photo of the Armory building. There is a gate and fence around the entire facility. And this particular photo was taken at the southern edge of the site, just past the entrance gate. And here is this year's proposal, which is similar to the last few years. The winter shelter will operate from December 1st, 2021 to April 15th, 2022. And as stated in the operating plan, which is included as attachment 4 of the agenda packet, The maximum capacity is up to 50 participants, and they must be all pre-registered with Trinity Center and a member for a minimum of 15 days. The total capacity may be less due to current health requirements pertaining to COVID-19. There are no walk-ups allowed. People cannot just show up at the Armory and expect to receive housing for the night. And intake will occur at the Trinity Center, and participants will be transported to and from the Armory through the use of a shuttle or the use of their own registered vehicles, which was allowed per the management agreement, given the social distancing requirements of COVID-19. And no alcohol or drugs are allowed, and no in and out privileges are given during the night. So the participants would be expected to arrive at the shelter all at once, bed down for the night, and leave in the morning, returning to the Trinity Center for its day program that's located at 1888 Trinity Avenue. And there would be on-site security provided by the Trinity Center at the Armory, and National Guard personnel and a Trinity Center staff member will be present on site every night. And just to quickly go over last year's winter shelter program, some operational changes were made last year to comply with the COVID-19 public health requirements to ensure the safety of participants, staff, and of course the surrounding community. The program assisted less homeless people last year due to the COVID restrictions as compared to the previous years, which usually saw around 38 homeless individuals at the Armory. Last year's winter shelter program was a bit challenging due to the state and county regulations related to COVID and social distancing requirements. And due to the social distancing, the individual tents were spaced 12 feet apart in all directions, which basically limited the nightly capacity to 17 individuals. And the average nightly attendance was approximately 8 individuals. Sanitizing protocols were also strictly enforced, and cleaning was required twice a day. Members and staff maintaining social distancing. Social time that included board games or movies was suspended for the 2020 program due to COVID restrictions. And I believe that will be suspended this year as well because the distancing requirements and the COVID restrictions are still in place. Trinity Center vehicles also could not transport at full capacity due to the distancing requirements. And the evening program staff made several trips to shuttle each member to the Armory. And the city manager also approved an alternative transportation plan that was allowed by the current management agreement. Again, that's included as attachment 7 of your agenda packet. It basically authorized Trinity Center members to drive their own registered and insured vehicles to the Armory and park there overnight. Trinity Center is pursuing that same transportation agreement with the city manager for this current proposal as well, given that the health regulations pertaining to social distancing are still in place. And additionally, COVID-19 protocols limited the number of people that were able to access the day services that are provided by this program. And instead of communal dining that was seen at the Trinity Center the past years, the meals were provided in a grab and go format, and participants had to eat outside to maintain social distancing. And the meals will be provided in the same manner this year as well. And here's a look at this year's evening winter shelter that will operate essentially the same as last year. There may be some flexibility and changes depending on the current public health regulations. And Trinity Center will operate to be in compliance with the current state and county public health regulations. The current guidelines does require physical distancing by remaining 6 feet apart from other people inside the same room. Last year, these guidelines were a bit more restrictive as the sleeping tents were required to be placed 12 feet apart in all directions, which basically limited the maximum capacity for the Armory, for sleeping in the Armory to 17 participants. The current guidelines on social distancing will allow this year's winter shelter program to increase that capacity and serve more homeless individuals, while of course complying with all of the health and safety rules. And the current guidelines also states that the passengers are required to wear a mask in each transport. However, social distancing is not required in vehicles for fully vaccinated individuals. And some of the similarities in the operation from last year will be that Trinity Center will continue to require health screenings of all of the participants in the operation. That would consist of flu shots and COVID-19 testing. And during the program hours, the masking and physical distancing will be enforced to keep everybody safe. Trinity Center will also continue to clean and sanitize the facility every morning after the participants leave. And similar to last year, the transportation vehicles, due to distancing requirements, will not be able to transport at full capacity. So trips will be made back and forth to the Armory to shuttle the members. And of course, Trinity Center members will also be able to drive themselves to the Armory and park there overnight, similar to last year. Trinity Center will monitor participants who may have fever or any type of COVID-19 symptoms. And like last year, intake will happen at the Trinity Center, and members will have access to all of the day services. However, due to the COVID-19 protocols, it will, of course, limit the number of people that are allowed inside at any given time. And when it comes to the conditional use permit, the Housing Accountability Act limits a local jurisdiction's ability to deny shelters unless it can make any of these required findings that are listed on this slide. 4 of these findings are not applicable as the city has not met its need for shelters. And there are no specific state or federal laws that are requiring denial. The Armory is not zoned for agricultural uses, and the shelter is not inconsistent with the zoning ordinance, which basically allows operations of a homeless shelter with approval of a use permit in the community facility zone. And then the 5th finding is whether or not the shelter would have any adverse impacts on the public health and safety. The management agreement, the Trinity Center operations plan, and the license agreement all have taken this into consideration, and any potential effects on the park and neighboring community will be mitigated as intake will occur at Trinity Center Day Program site. And security at the Armory will be provided by the National Guard and also by a hired security service. And the city's police department will also be required to conduct daily visits to the site as a condition of the license agreement. And in the past year, there was no significant police activity, and 0 complaints were filed about the program, and there were no incidences that were related to COVID-19 infections. Additionally, the management agreement and the conditional use permit resolution both require that the Trinity Center complies with all of the current public health requirements pertaining to COVID-19. And if approved tonight, a condition of approval has also been included that the conditional use permit will expire on April 16th, 2022, or upon completion of the winter shelter program, whichever occurs first of the 2. For these reasons, staff does not believe that any of the required findings for denial can be made tonight, as the emergency shelter will not have an adverse impact on the public health or safety. And with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit to allow Trinity Center to operate the temporary homeless shelter at the Armory for the upcoming winter season from December 1st, 2021 to April 15th, 2022, subject to the attached conditions of approval. And Trinity Center, I believe, does have a presentation tonight, and they will provide an update on the program operations and also the success from the previous year. And with that, I conclude my presentation, but I will be here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very nice presentation. Any commissioners have any questions of staff? Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, I wasn't entirely clear. Was there, last winter, there was a limitation of 17 rather than the 38 to 50 that you had before. Is your anticipation that this winter, it will be again the 17, or will you be able to expand that under either the current or expected protocols?
Yeah, the current county and state guidelines may allow spacing tents to be 6 feet apart versus 12 feet apart, which was required last year. So given that distance, less of a distance that's required, it will increase the capacity for the shelter to allow to serve more individuals.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, we will open the public hearing and we will give the applicant 15 minutes to present their application.
And Mr. Chair, if I may note, actually really for the applicant's benefit, there's two attendees identifying themselves as from Trinity Center. One is Marjoline Doss, and the other just says Zoom Trinity Center. So just in case they were intending on having multiple people in the presentation.
Terrific, and thank you very much. Do I need to do anything to switch over to the? In the meantime, though, let me please say thank you. It is so good to be among you all. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and esteemed members of the Planning Commission. We, my colleague Moji Shoberi and I, and my colleagues joined online, are so glad to be with you tonight to seek your approval of this conditional use permit application that will allow us to continue our successful and life-saving program. Ms. Gill did such a wonderful job of giving you a very thorough overview, so I will just add some color and detail and feel-good stuff about it, if you don't mind. Trinity Center has been doing this program, as Ms. Gill said, for 7 years, 6 in the Armory. And we do it because it is the most concrete expression of our mission that we can possibly express in the community. And we do it because people need a safe place to be during the winter. Our mission statement has shifted a little bit. We went through an extensive strategic planning process, revised our mission statement a little bit to reflect the evolving services we're offering and the growing need for a variety of services needed within our community. So at Trinity Center, we're a doorway to opportunity, providing both essential safety net services and a pathway forward for vulnerable populations. We advocate for those who are seeking housing, financial stability, and wellness. And we invite everybody, all our neighbors, all our leaders, to join us in that mission to uphold the values of dignity, inclusion, equity, and vibrancy of life for all. Our vision of a community is one that is working together to address the devastating effects of poverty and remove barriers to stable housing through compassionate services, education, shelter, and advocacy. And we do this still holding true to our core values of hope and hospitality, compassion and community, respect, partnership, inclusion, equity, dignity, and health. Because as we know so very much, health is housing and housing is health. You can't pull the two apart. So before last year's very unusual season, the normal practice was that people would gather at Trinity Center, eat, and then head on over in the van or assisted by volunteers who would drive members over to the evening program, set up their cots, and retire for the night after maybe a little bit of social time. Lights out where it was at 10, and in the morning, everybody would wake up, break down their cots. And one of the most beautiful things I ever saw was an evening over there where the younger people were helping the older people set up the cots. It was just such a beautiful expression of community. And then in the morning, the members are transported back to Trinity Center, where they wait until we open up at 8 o'clock. During COVID, it was substantially the same, and Ms. Gill gave a great overview of how it went. One of the big changes was that we were able to have members drive along with the van in caravan over to the Armory, which really, really made a difference in our ability to get over there effectively, efficiently, and again, keep everybody as distanced and isolated from each other as possible. We used pop-up tents, so instead of just cots putting up, they were putting up popped-up tents, and apparently that was not very successful. But we're going to do it again this year because our primary goal, as with everything, is to keep each other safe. So tonight, if you approve our moving forward with this process, well, when we start, which will be about mid-December, we will have already vetted the applicants for the program. They will have had all their health and safety shots. We will have reviewed their names with the Walnut Creek Police Department to make sure that they don't have any outstanding warrants or any concerns on the part of the police about these particular individuals. And then they will start joining the program. They'll meet us at Trinity Center at 5:30, be treated to a nice hot dinner. We probably will do it outside. We're hoping inside if the weather stays all right or if our county community's protocols lighten up a little bit. And then everybody will head over to the Armory, set up their cots and tents, bunk down for the night, and with still lights out at 10. One moment of conversation about smoking. People can't just go in and out to smoke. There's a once hourly smoke break where people are attended outside with staff supervision to smoke. but that ends at 10 also. And 6 o'clock, lights up, and it's time to get ready to come back to the center. One of the features of the management agreement is that a professional security guard is also on site, just outside the Armory property technically, but is on site from about 6 o'clock till about 11 or 12. So if during those hours when people are awake and moving around, we also have additional security. So our goal is to keep everyone safe. That's really what it's about. That's why we operate the program, and that's how we operate the program. Historically, we've been able to serve 38 people per night with an emergency bed protocol that can be enacted if there's a weather emergency, and the county supports doing that. But we haven't had to do that for a while. However, in winter of 2021, we were only able to, as Ms. Gill said, serve up to 17 people per night. This year, with the reduction of the mandatory spacing, we're thinking we can provide more like 28 to 30 beds on a consistent basis, and any protocols for winter emergency beds will still have to be determined. All participants will have to have their flu shots current. They'll have to have a full process treatment of their COVID vaccines, boosters if possible, and be subject to testing. What is required by the Armory, although not general rules for shelters, is clearance for TB also. So they will have been tested for TB and, as I mentioned, the Walnut Creek Police Department review. On site, we'll have the professional security and the National Guard personnel, and our Trinity Center leadership, who will provide support, monitoring, daily or evening, hourly, going through the rounds to make sure there are no hazards or fire hazards. This year, what we hope will be different is that the time that people have between when they get there and when lights are out may not be able to be used for social time, gathering and playing games, but will be time available with the skilled shelter staff that we will have this year to start working on some of the case management issues. We'll have computers over there, laptops. People can start doing some of the work in the evening that they would also have been doing during the daytime. Or for people who are working, they don't come to the center in the daytime, but those precious evening hours, they can get other work done with the support of the case managers. Member advocacy is also there for behavioral issues. It happens. And those can be dealt with immediately on site by the staff and then followed up at the center the next day. The forum for public feedback, we didn't say much about this, but instead of a set-apart public meeting, what we did last year, which we think worked well, and city staff supported it, was having it a public forum opportunity at the front end of the monthly Walnut Creek Homeless Task Force meeting. So we propose and hope that that will be the same way again. And of course, Trinity Center is the beginning and the end of it. And while the people come during the day, that's when they can still get access to meals, showers, laundry, and ongoing case management. So while we can't have those services over at the Armory, people who are part of the Walnut Creek evening program, with your approval, would be able to access those services the next day. But we're not just a shelter, and that's really why we feel so strongly about our program. It aligns with our mission to be the doorway to opportunity, and it keeps people safe. We see it as an extension of our day program, not two separate things, but it allows people during those cold, potentially rainy, hopefully rainy, winter months, to know that they have a safe space, that they're not gonna have to do all that work during the day and then spend their evening trying to find a safe place to be out of the rain. As part of the agreement to be in the program, each member creates a personal goal plan and agrees to work specifically with a member advocate during those evening and daytime hours on that personal action plan. We do build connection nonetheless. People still will tell jokes, even if it's 6 feet apart. People will still talk about each other snoring at night. A little community is built up together and sustained during the daytime hours. One of the really most beautiful things last year that I saw was when one of the members got very, very sick after taking the COVID vaccine, one of the members of the evening program, and the whole next day, everybody was at Trinity Center, all the other evening program members like, you okay? Can I get you anything? The watching them watch out for each other was so beautiful, and that happens all the time in the program. And what's also important is it allows people to build trust in themselves, trust in the system, trust in the coordinated entry system that is designed to help them move back into permanent housing, and trust that the community cares about them. Oops, wrong direction, sorry. It's inevitable. I always do one tech kaflooey thing per meeting or presentation. It's just inevitable. Last year, we served 18 separate individuals. They didn't all stay the entire season, but we tried really hard for that to happen. Because you'll remember, this time last year, really no one quite knew what to expect with COVID, what would keep people safe, what really was risky behavior. So we asked members to commit to staying as much as possible every single night. Many did not. Some started and didn't finish, but at the end, other people joined back in. So 18 individuals were served, which is considerably fewer than normal years, and we would certainly expect a higher number, more like 45 to 50 this year, of individuals served throughout the season. That's standard for a program for us. We operated it for less time, only 88 nights. Our funding was a little bit reduced because we had additional costs for the extra cleaning. And it took a while to ramp up and get everybody organized, because for the longest time, we weren't even sure we would be able to operate a program, even though we had gone through the entire process with the city. But people did have 88 safe, restful nights and the daytime services. Now, of course, what happened last year was right after we started, which was January 11th. You'll recall the National Guard was activated. So practically as soon as we got there, we had to not be there. And this, of course, is always one of the weak spots in working in the Armory. You never know when something could happen and we wouldn't have access to it. Well, we weathered that storm this year. We were able to use private resources that we had to have people have temporary accommodations at the local hotel. That was great. That was very successful. The members were very grateful that they could stay in. Again, January, it was the height of COVID. Nobody really had gotten vaccinations. So we were able to meet that flexibility, use private funds to ensure that the members who were part of the program could stay safe. So for 11 nights, that worked. And overall, through the year, we served about half and half. About 50% of the people were my age or older, and the rest younger, and it was about half and half men and women. These are typical of our annual statistics. And even despite all of that, despite COVID, despite every single challenge that we had, people succeeded and the program succeeded. Out of those individuals, 2 we know regained permanent housing, one through his status as a veteran, and one, as you'll hear about her in a minute, through her work in recovery from substance abuse issues. We think 2 more got housing when they moved out of state. They decided it was too expensive to live here in this area. They moved out of state, closer to family, and it's our belief, but we don't know for sure, that they got housed again. Members worked really hard on employment. The people who were able to access the shelter last year were not the most vulnerable, which is typically who we see for we serve for the shelter program, and probably will be this year. Last year, the most vulnerable people were able to access the Project Room Key hotels through coordinated entry in the county. So we were seeing that next group of people who weren't old enough or ill enough to access that, but still had a need. And they were very capable, and many of them, as you see, went out and got jobs. We did COVID vaccinations for everybody, and throughout the whole process, we provided constant health and safety information. And one person that you'll hear about again, not only was she able to access housing eventually, but it was because she took the steps with the support of the program and knowing she had a safe place to be every night to overcome her substance abuse issues. So out of those 18, unfortunately, it wasn't like most years where people could exit our program and maybe get into the Concord shelter, because the Concord shelter was still closed for renovations. So some of our members did return to staying in their cars, but luckily it was after the worst of the weather. Some did return to their typical habit of living outdoors, but again, we helped them get through the worst of the winter weather. 2 were housed for sure, 2 moved out of state, and we think they were housed. 1 was back into temporary housing, and 1 got into a nursing facility by virtue of the fact that she was at our shelter, had a health emergency, went through that whole system, and ultimately was placed where she needed to be, which was in a higher level of care, which wouldn't have happened if she had had that health emergency on the street. So. And then there are a million other good things that happen. People get strengthened relationships with their families. They spend the time getting the legal referrals they need. They build their life skills. They go back to school. Big one is getting connected with mental health resources. So we use this time for them to really take a breath, make a plan, and follow through on that plan. And one example of that is our friend Jenny. She came to us, delightful person, very energetic, and you would never, if you saw her walking down the street, you would never know that she was a person experiencing homelessness. She dressed snazzy, very upbeat, very positive, but struggling really hard with substance abuse issues. So she came and was part of our program. She worked with our certified substance use counselor every day when she was at the center. We weren't at that point able to have group peer support recovery meetings, but she got the one-on-one help. She was able to stay sober throughout the program and immediately transition into a residential treatment program when the shelter program ended. From there, she stayed successful, was able to access sober living environment housing, and is now successfully housed on her own, comes back and sees us. So she is someone who inspires us all and wants us to keep doing what we're doing, so we hope that you can give us your approval tonight. I think that was it. Thank you. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I could talk about this all the time, but you're already giving so generously of your time, so I am at your disposal. Thank you.
Great, well, thank you for that very nice presentation. Any commission members have questions for the applicant? Commissioner Strongman?
Oh, I have to go first, okay. There we go. You mentioned COVID vaccines. Do you actually help them get COVID vaccines with transportation and all?
Yes, we have, we can. What we mostly were able to do actually was through our connections with healthcare for the homeless, bring the vaccines on site to Trinity Center, which is way more effective.
Correct.
So we had 2 separate education and vaccination events at Trinity Center. But before all of that happened and before winter shelter program, we were able to help people get the flu shots again on site. This year, what we also have available to us is we now know how to test people for COVID. So if there was any reason on any given night to think that someone may be presenting with symptoms, we can test them right then and there and get them connected with the services that they actually would require if it's a positive test. So that's an advantage we have this year. And we continue to invite people to do the vaccination. We plan to have another flu shot and COVID vaccine event before the season starts.
Okay. And since you've been doing, this is the 7th year, have you ever done any longitudinal study of those that were housed, you found housing back 7 years ago? Are they still housed?
Some of them actually are our staff. Some, yes. So in anecdotal ways, yes.
Okay.
Some of our members who've shown themselves to be, stable and wanting to give back to the community are now our staff, and now they're permanently housed in the apartments upstairs. So we're really proud of that. It doesn't happen in every case, but some of those very people are now our staff and supporting others along the way.
Great. I noticed, was reading on the service dogs, and my neighbor is diabetic, and if he was homeless, he has a diabetic dog that triggers on it. Would that dog be allowed in if he was one of the participants?
With the proper documentation, yes. We always can do that if they're a service animal with the proper documentation.
And do you know what the unhoused population of Walnut Creek is today? Off the top of your head?
It changes. We know that we at Trinity Center are seeing 70 to 80 people a day. They aren't necessarily strictly, literally homeless, and they aren't necessarily all from Walnut Creek, but the order of magnitude is probably 2 or 3 times that number.
Okay.
People who don't come to Trinity Center, or people who don't identify as homeless, or people who are in the encampments and aren't needing to come to us. And then, of course, there's a whole host of hidden homeless, people who are trying really hard to stay under the radar. So I would say the number is on anywhere from 70 to 225 if you could really find all of them. So the point in time count is coming up again next January, and we'll see.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Anderson?
You probably may have partially answered this, but last year we had a lower capacity. But even then, we're only about half full most of the time. That was a significant departure from previous years, I gather. It sounds like you're expecting that with COVID somewhat under control, that you'll basically go back to what you were doing before. Is there any concern that things have in fact, changed on a more permanent basis, and you may not be filling the capacity that you're providing?
What happens every year, and it happened last year too, is it's sort of a bell curve. At the start, it's a little slow. People haven't maybe finished getting all their tests, or the police department hasn't cleared them or whatever. So it's a bell curve, and then we hit capacity for a while, and then it starts to taper off as the weather gets a little better, they find other opportunities. That happened last year as well, so we were slow, few, and then at capacity, and then whoop, back down. We would imagine that trend would happen the same way this year. What's going to be different this year, though, is we are insisting that people be fully vaccinated. So for those people making the choice not to be fully vaccinated, they won't be using this opportunity. At the same time, the county's shelter system has been decreased in capacity because they've increased the quality of the sleeping arrangements over at the Concord shelter. So system-wide, there are fewer opportunities. So we think that that will balance the people who just are not going to do the COVID vaccine. And we're not planning to waver on that. Protecting everybody, our staff, all the other members in the community at large is far too important. So we are not, we don't know exactly, but we are pretty confident that the resource will be much better used this year, certainly at the 28 to 30. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will now open it up to public speakers. If there's anybody who wishes to speak on this matter, we will give them 3 minutes. So do we have any speakers?
We have no speakers in person. For those joining us on Zoom, I would like to note that if they wish to address the commission, please use the raise hand feature now, or press star 9 if you're connecting via phone audio only, and we will call you in. And give a few seconds here. And I'm not seeing any hands going up. And we have not received any written correspondence either.
Okay. I'll wait 10 seconds. Okay, seeing no speakers, I assume the applicant has no further responses to the lack of speakers. I will ask if you have anything else you wanted to add, feel free.
No, only maybe this is a case of no news is good news, that the community has welcomed and seen that some of the worst fears that were expressed early on are simply not true, and the level of care and support and recognition in our community about the urgency of services like this. They're not the permanent answer, but at least they're keeping people safe and alive, that the community needs them, and that we are proud to offer them.
Great, thank you. Okay, we will close the public hearing, and I'll bring it back to the commissioners for any additional questions, comments, or motions. Commissioner Lisak.
I'd just like to thank the folks at the Trinity Center very much for everything you do. And I would like to make a motion to approve the resolution for the Trinity Winter Evening Program, Evening Winter Shelter Conditional Use Permit, application number Y21-097.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Secretary, can you call the roll?
Certainly. Commissioner Lezak,
Yes.
Commissioner Pickett,
Yes.
Commissioner Strongman,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reiser,
Yes.
Chair Krasalik.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously, 6-0.
thank you. Thank you for all you do, and good luck this winter.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to our next item, which is commission considerations. Do we have any this evening, Mr. Secretary?
If I can get my thumbs to work here on the agenda. No, we do not.
Are there any commission member announcements or staff announcements?
Well, I don't want to jump ahead of any commissioners, so seeing as there are none, I will just note that our next scheduled meeting for the Planning Commission will be in 2 weeks. However, as of this moment, we have not received any items for the agenda, and as it happens, so let me say that though it's not official until an agenda gets published, you should probably expect that meeting to be canceled. But if you're really hoping to come into City Hall for a public meeting, that same night, in the same chambers, with the same secretary, you can come and at least watch the Transportation Commission, who we do anticipate having a meeting that night. As you may have noted, of course, on the calendar for 2022, we've fixed that, so we're not going to have a double-booked night in November. Other than that, I have nothing else to add.
Okay, great. Well, seeing no other business this evening, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.